Okay, nothing special today. Nothing special at all. But I'm just going to do them anyway. Actually, I've got a couple that I haven't written down, so I'm just going to quickly bounce them off the top of my head right now. One of them is... Oh, this is annoying, because last night my phone was really low on battery, and if I think I'm going to be writing down some ideas, not that I ever should, then I just leave my phone on, but in airplane mode I usually turn it off otherwise. And last night I had a couple of ideas, but I was so tired I couldn't bother to turn my phone back on because I'd already turned it off. And sometimes I have a kind of backup method of just using the loci system to try and give myself some starters the next morning. And I tried it, but I was obviously so tired that I didn't really make proper loci, what do you call them, prompts things. Anyway, and one of them I've forgotten completely, and it was the better one. Well, it was not as bad one. Anyway, whatever. One of them was just a question of, I wonder if room temperature affects quality of sleep. Well, obviously it does to some degree. If you're in fucking minus 50 degrees, you mustn't sleep very well. But I wonder if having a very warm room is better. And maybe you need fewer hours of sleep. Don't know. Just noticed that a couple of times that I was waking up. Maybe I'm just waking up because I'm too hot. But I felt just as refreshed as otherwise. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. Another one was, and this is nothing new, but the main thing that reminded me of it was, maybe the main thing that reminded me of this thing, which then reminded me of this thing, was the Sam Harris podcast with the global warming guy. And he talked about how when you have overlapping normal distributions, then at the extremes, things at the extreme become more frequent, and they're the things that matter. And I think this is actually a very important idea. If a lot more people understood, they'd have a better, more understanding view of the world. And it's just obviously in that case it's just the same thing that's changed over time, so it's quite important to realise that time can make overlapping normal distributions, but also between two separate groups. When you have overlapping normal distributions of them, then if you put any threshold towards the right or left, further to the right or left hand side, then the average at the middle is obviously going to remain fairly similar, and you'll think the difference is negligible. But when you look at the extremes, you draw a line right towards the end, you can basically bring one down to where 0.0001% of that normal distribution might exhibit that attribute, and then you can get, depending on how much they overlap, you can have one which is basically 100% of the people who express that attribute between the two normal distributions would be made up from one of the normal distributions. Anyway, I didn't express that very well anyway. Anyway, can I stop saying anyway? Please? Thank you. Okay. And these were just a couple of crappy ones. Well, not that those weren't crappy, I'm just saying more crappy ones, I suppose. I think the unique characteristic of the jobs which will remain occupiable by... Oh, this was terrible. This is a really bad one. This is just terrible. I mean, people have been saying, just stick with what other people have already said before. It was a nothing statement, this one, anyway. Anyway. In a world still occupied... I think the unique characteristic of the jobs which will remain occupiable by humans, in a world still occupied in part by humans, will be those which require either an immediate or indirect spectator. Obviously, people have states that would... Obviously, people have stated that we will need to move away from menial repetitive jobs, and more of us embrace the arts and general creativity. These fields fit my hypothesis, but the most recent public leaps in artificial intelligence suggests one thing to me. Leaps that the public are aware of. Suggest one thing to me. We're not necessarily interested in watching the very best systems compete with the other very best systems in any one domain. Take Robot Wars, for example. We enjoy watching Robot Wars, or, well, I suppose we did back in the day, but not only did robots not start participating in human fights, a strong argument can be made for this being due to the grotesqueness that would result, but also robot fighting did not replace publicised human fights. MMA is more popular than ever. Although, of course, I'm not saying the robots were better than humans back when that was popular. Anyway, I imagine all sports will go this same way. The demand for seeing competent robots compete at a higher level than humans at a higher level than humans are capable of will increase. But I doubt very much that this will considerably impact the interest in watching humans compete at the same level they always have. Very few people like to go to YouTube to watch simulated sports fixtures, or AlphaZero play AlphaZero over and over again, even though they will watch professional chess and go matches, despite the quality of the gameplay being inferior. Perhaps this will change as we begin to develop more personal relationships with artificial systems, and their cognitive abilities become general enough to form friendships. Then we will undoubtedly develop interests in finding common grounds for entertainment. But in the meantime, audience-related jobs will probably be safest, so athletes of all kinds, authors, entertainers, and so on. I've always found Jordan Peterson's recommendation to clean your room rather patronising, and obviously there are some people for whom it isn't at all patronising, but I don't think most people are in that situation. And of course, just because they're not most people doesn't mean they don't matter. There are just fewer of them who matter just as much as the same number of most people, but which only makes up a fraction of most people. Anyway, I think a far better piece of advice, and far more efficacious, would be design your own room to suit your best interests. So if you wanted to be a writer, you might centre the room around a clear desk with a laptop, clear as in not cluttered, and minimise clutter around that workspace. I haven't made any truly inflammatory statements for a while, not that I'm taking much of a risk when I do, with an audience of 0, but this should rectify the drought. I wonder if the Holocaust had any influence on the intelligence of the Jewish population. And here's the inflammatory bit. In many ways, I imagine it would have functioned like an incomplete course of antibiotics. Of course, I'm not saying Jewish people are like an infection, but I am saying that any population, and it really is regardless of who that population is made up of, it could be people who like football, just any number of people selected from the population. If artificial environmental pressures are imposed upon them, then only the fittest will survive. And of course, fitness also takes into account intelligence and determination and all possible attributes that could affect survivability in face of the particular adverse conditions. I liken this to bacteria because after an incomplete course of antibiotics, the bacteria that survive are those which had attributes which gave them superior resilience, and so the following generations will be made up of a high proportion of the population with these attributes. That sentence is a bit crappy. Than before the treatment had been undertaken. It's not really inflammatory if you actually understand it. Anyway, Eckert cannot be intelligent. He needs to have no untoward advantages. And I'd say intelligence would be one of those. And the situation I had in my head was being asked a simple math question at school, something like 4 times 4, and he knew it. He knew it, but it just wouldn't come. That's what I imagine. Not that I have to imagine. I know what it's like to not be intelligent in certain situations sometimes. It feels like, okay, terrible. There was one other idea there that I forgot to include in the stuff that I had written down. I'll just do it now. And it harks back to the thing I said about us not long ago and evolution and stuff like that. And how we're an experiment. Each one of us is an experiment with, different combinations and alterations of genes and gene expression. But there's another way you can look at it. There's a kind of flip side if you wanted to be kind of self-helpy and look at it this way. We're all descended from one single-celled organism, right? And I don't actually know how long ago it's estimated that life began. It doesn't really matter. It's at least millions, right? I imagine it's probably billions. Probably something like 3 billion. I don't know. I can't remember. I think the universe started something like 13 billion years ago or something like that. I can't remember. Anyway, I can't remember. I wasn't there. The point is, whatever makes up you, all the things that make you who you are and all that, right? They are the culmination of things which, I'm assuming, let's just say 3 billion years, which 3 billion years of adversity were not enough to stop from making you now. So, whatever you are, it's pretty resilient there. So you can, if you're cynical enough, you can just say, so what? That's kind of where I am. But you can see how some people might try and take it and go, wow, there must be something in me, man. something in me that's meant to be here, or not meant. That's where I would kind of, but something about me has been so superior that it's made it all this way. So yeah, something there, mate, something there. Yeah, nice one. Yeah. But anyway, just think about that. Yeah, just think about it.